In a quiet village in medieval England, two children, a boy and a girl, appeared from nowhere. They were alone, they were frightened. And their skin was green, not painted, not stained, green. The villagers had never seen anything like them before. Their clothes looked strange. Their language sounded like nothing anyone could understand. And when food was placed in front of them, they refused everything: bread, meat, milk, nothing. Until they saw one thing: beans. Only then did they begin to eat. But the mystery was only beginning. At first, no one knew who they were, where they came from, or what they were trying to say. But after the boy became sick and died, the girl survived. Slowly, she learned the language of the people around her. And when she was finally able to speak in words they understood, she told them something that made the mystery even stranger. So impossible that people are still arguing about it more than 800 years later. She said they came from a land with no bright sun. A place of endless twilight, a place where everyone was green. So who were the green children of Woolpit? Before the green children appeared, Woolpit was just a quiet village in Suffolk, England. There were no cameras, no newspapers, no police reports, no modern science to test what people saw. There were only fields, forests, church bells, village gossip, and frightened witnesses trying to understand something that did not fit their world. In the 12th century, England was a very different place. Life was hard. Most people lived close to the land. They worked in the fields, raised animals, obeyed the church, and feared anything they could not explain. A strange illness could be seen as a curse. A bad harvest could be blamed on sin. A mysterious stranger could become a sign from God or a warning from somewhere darker. And in this world stood Woolpit, a small village surrounded by farmland and woodland. Its name is believed by many to be connected to old wolf pits, deep traps once used to catch wolves. Whether every detail of that origin is certain or not, the image is powerful. A quiet English village, surrounded by danger, memory, and mystery. During the day, villagers worked under the open sky, men harvested crops, women carried food and water, children ran through narrow paths, animals moved through muddy lanes. And when the sun went down, darkness swallowed the fields quickly. There were no streetlights, no engines, no phones, only candles in windows, smoke from small homes, and the sound of the countryside at night. To us, Woolpit may look like just another old village on a map. But to the people who lived there, it was their whole world. They knew each other's faces. They knew each other's families. They knew who belonged there and who did not. That is why the arrival of two unknown children would have shocked everyone. Because in a village like Woolpit, strangers did not simply appear without explanation. And these were not ordinary strangers. The story says the children were found during the harvest season when the fields were busy and people were working under the sun. It should have been a normal day, the kind of day no one would remember. But then something changed. Somewhere near the village, close to the fields, the villagers noticed two children, a boy and a girl. They were alone. No mother, no father, no cart. No traveler, no sign of where they had come from. At first, the villagers may have thought they were lost. But as they came closer, fear must have moved through the crowd. Because the children did not look like the children of Woolpit. Their clothes were strange, their language was strange. And most disturbing of all, their skin had a green color, not a little dirty, not covered in paint. Green. Imagine the silence that must have followed, the villagers staring, the children trembling, no one understanding what they were saying. No one knowing whether to help them or run from them. In medieval England, stories of spirits, fairies, miracles, demons, and signs from the unseen world were taken seriously. So when two green children appeared near a village known for its pits and fields, people would not have treated it like a simple missing child case. To them, this could have been something holy or something dangerous. Maybe the children had come from a foreign land. Maybe they were victims of some unknown sickness. Maybe they had crawled out from the earth itself. Or maybe, as some would later believe, they had crossed over from a place that was never meant to touch our world. But at that moment, no one had answers, only questions. Who were they? Why were they green? Why could no one understand their words? And why did no one come looking for them? The villagers took the children in, but the mystery followed them. Because the green skin was only the beginning. Soon, they would discover something even stranger. The children would not eat. Not bread, not meat, not anything the villagers offered. They looked afraid of the food, as if they had never seen it before. And then when all hope seemed lost, they finally reacted to one thing: beans, only beans. And that small detail would become one of the strangest clues in an 800-year-old mystery that no one has ever fully solved. It began like an ordinary day. The kind of day no one expects to become history. In the fields near Woolpit, villagers were going about their usual work. Some were cutting crops. Some were gathering what had been harvested. Others may have been walking along the paths that led through the village and into the open farmland. The air would have been filled with simple sounds: the sound of tools, the sound of animals, the sound of people working. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing warned them that they were about to see something that would be remembered for more than 800 years. Then someone noticed movement. At first it may have looked like two small figures standing near the edge of the field, children. A boy and a girl, alone. No adults beside them, no cart, no horse, no sign of a family, no one calling their names. In a small village like Woolpit, that alone would have been strange. People knew each other. Families were familiar. Children did not simply appear in the fields with no explanation. But as the villagers came closer, concern turned into confusion. Then confusion turned into fear. Because these children did not look like anyone they had ever seen before. Their clothes were unfamiliar. Their faces were frightened. Their eyes searched the crowd as if they had no idea where they were. And then the villagers saw the detail that would turn this moment into a legend. Their skin was green, not slightly pale, not dirty from the fields, not stained by grass or mud. Green. Imagine the villagers standing there, unable to speak for a moment. They were looking at children who seemed human. But different in a way no one could explain. Some may have stepped back. Some may have crossed themselves. Some may have whispered prayers. Because in medieval England, the unknown was not just strange. The unknown was dangerous. People believed the world was full of hidden signs. A child born different could be seen as a warning. A sudden sickness could be blamed on spirits. A strange visitor could be treated as a message from heaven or something darker. So when two green children appeared without warning, the villagers were not just curious. They were afraid. They tried to speak to them. But the children answered in a language no one understood. Their words sounded foreign, broken, strange. No one knew if they were asking for help. No one knew if they were crying for their parents. No one knew if they were warning the villagers about something. The boy and girl seemed confused too. They were surrounded by people, but completely alone. No one understood them, and they understood no one. The villagers may have asked simple questions. Who are you? Where are your parents? Where did you come from? But the children could not answer in a way anyone understood. That made the mystery even deeper. If they were from a nearby village, someone would have recognized their speech. If they were travelers, children, someone might have known their clothing. If they were lost, there should have been footprints, a road, a family searching, some clue to explain how they arrived. But there was nothing. Only two children, green-skinned, strangely dressed, speaking an unknown language, standing in the fields of Woolpit like they had stepped out of another world. The villagers had to make a choice. Leave them there, run from them, call the priest, or take them. Fear they felt. The children were still children. They looked weak. They looked hungry. They looked terrified, so the villagers brought them into the village. But bringing them closer did not make the mystery easier to understand. It made it worse. Because once the children were safe, the villagers tried to feed them. They placed food before them. Bread, meat, milk. Food every hungry child in medieval England would have understood. But the green children refused. They would not eat. They looked at the food as if it meant nothing to them, as if it was strange, as if it came from a world they did not know. This frightened the villagers even more. What kind of children refused bread? What kind of children did not recognize ordinary food? Were they sick? Were they cursed? Were they even from this land? Day after day, the children resisted the food they were given. Their bodies were weak. Their faces were afraid. The villagers watched them closely, trying to understand what they wanted. Then finally, one small clue appeared: beans. When the children saw beans, everything changed. For the first time, they reacted. For the first time, they seemed to recognize something. They ate. Only then did the villagers realize that the children were not refusing food because they were not hungry. They were refusing because the food was unfamiliar to them. But why? Where could children come from if they did not know bread? Where could children come from if their skin was green? Where could children come from if no one understood their language? The people of Woolpit had found them, they had brought them in, they had fed them, but they were no closer to the truth. And soon the mystery would turn from strange to tragic, because one of the children would not survive. The villagers had already seen enough to be afraid. 2 unknown children had appeared near Woolpit. Their skin was green. Their clothing was unfamiliar. Their language could not be understood. But the more the villagers watched them, the stranger the story became. Because this was not only a story about how the children looked, it was about how they behaved. When the boy and girl were brought into the village, people expected them to act like lost children, hungry, desperate, ready to eat anything placed before them. In medieval England, food was not something poor people wasted. Bread, milk, meat, and simple vegetables were valuable. A hungry child would normally eat quickly, especially after wandering alone with no family and no protection. But these children did not. The villagers offered them food, they refused. Bread was placed before them, they would not touch it. Meat was offered, they turned away. Milk, porridge, and other simple food were brought to them, still they refused. This made the villagers even more confused. At first, maybe they thought the children were too frightened to eat. Maybe the crowd scared them. Maybe they were sick. Maybe they were grieving. But as time passed, it became clear that something else was happening. The children were not refusing food because they were not hungry. They were refusing because they did not seem to recognize the food. Imagine that moment. The villagers were looking at 2 children who looked human, cried like humans, and seemed afraid like humans, but they acted as if ordinary food from the village was strange to them. That detail turned fear into something deeper, because food connects people to where they come from. A child who recognizes bread usually comes from a world where bread exists. A child who drinks milk usually understands animals, farms, and village life. But these children seemed lost not only in a new village, they seemed lost in an entirely different way of living. Then something happened. The children saw beans, and suddenly they reacted. For the first time, they showed interest. They reached for them, they ate. Only beans. That small detail became one of the most famous parts of the Green Children mystery. Why beans? Why did they recognize that food and not the others? Were beans the only food they had eaten before? Were they hiding somewhere underground where only certain plants were available? Were they from a poor community where beans were one of the few foods they knew? Or was this detail part of a legend, added later to make the story feel even stranger? No one can say for certain. But in the story, beans became the first clue that helped the villagers keep the children alive. Slowly, the boy and girl began to accept other food. Little by little, their bodies adjusted. And as they ate more normal food, another strange change reportedly happened. Their green color began to fade. This is one of the most important details in the entire mystery. Because if their skin color faded after they changed their diet, then maybe their green appearance was not supernatural at all. Maybe it was caused by hunger. Maybe it was illness. Maybe it was the result of living in poor conditions before they were found. But if that is true, it only solves one part of the mystery. It does not explain their unknown language. It does not explain their strange clothing. It does not explain why no one came to find them. And it does not explain the story the girl would later tell. The villagers continued trying to communicate with them. They listened carefully to their words. But the children's speech did not match anything the villagers knew. It was not the familiar speech of nearby towns. It was not something they could easily understand as a local accent to the people of Woolpit. It sounded like a language from nowhere, and this made the children seem even more mysterious, because language tells people where you belong. If a stranger speaks differently, someone may still recognize the sound. A merchant might know it, a priest might have heard it, a traveler might understand it, but according to the story, no one understood the children at first. So the villagers were trapped between pity and fear. They wanted to help them, but they could not ask them who they were. They could not ask where their parents were. They could not ask whether someone had hurt them. They could not ask how they reached Woolpit. All they could do was watch. And what they watched was heartbreaking. The children were alone in a world where nobody understood their voices. The boy and girl had each other, but that was all. Everyone else was a stranger. Every building was strange. Every face was strange. Every sound was strange. Every meal was strange. To the villagers, the children were a mystery. But to the children, the villagers may have been the frightening ones. That is what makes this story powerful. It is not only about strange green skin. It is about two children trapped between worlds, one world they had lost, and another world that did not understand them. Over time, people began to wonder what they were. Were they human? Were they from another country? Were they abandoned? Were they sick? Were they connected to fairy stories, underground worlds, or hidden places that medieval people believed existed beyond normal life? Every answer created more questions. If they were foreigners, where were their parents if they were sick? Why did both children have the same strange color if they were simply lost? Why did no one search for them if they came from nearby? Why was their language unknown? And if they came from somewhere far away, how did two children travel alone and appear in Woolpit with no clear path behind them? The villagers had found their first clues: green skin, unknown speech, strange clothes, fear of ordinary food, a strange attachment to beans. But none of the clues pointed in one clear direction. They only made the mystery deeper. And then the story took a darker turn, because the children were not equally strong. The girl slowly adjusted. She began to survive. She began to learn. She began to change. But the boy was weaker. His body could not recover the same way. And soon, the village that had discovered two green children would be left with only one. One child would live to tell the story. The other would take his secrets to the grave. After the villagers found the two green children, they could not simply leave them in the fields. Whatever fear people felt, whatever whispers moved through Woolpit, one truth was clear. They were still children, they were alone, they were hungry, they were frightened, and they had no one. So the people of Woolpit brought them into the village. But for the boy and girl, this was not a rescue that immediately felt safe. It may have felt like being taken into another world. Every face was strange. Every voice was strange. Every building was strange. Every smell, every sound, every meal, every question, all of it belonged to a life they did not understand. The villagers watched them closely. Some watched with pity, some watched with fear. Some may have believed they were sick. Others may have whispered that they were not ordinary children at all. Because in the medieval world, people did not always separate mystery from miracle. A strange child could be seen as a sign. A strange illness could be seen as punishment. A stranger with unknown speech could be treated as a warning from God or something darker. And these children were stranger than anything Woolpit had ever seen. They were taken into care, and according to one version of the story, they were brought into the household of a local man named Sir Richard de Calney. There, the villagers tried to help them survive. They gave them shelter, they gave them food, they tried to comfort them, but helping them was not easy, because the children could not explain who they were. They could not name their parents in a way anyone understood. They could not point to a village the people recognized. They could not tell anyone how far they had traveled. They were surrounded by people trying to help them, but they were still trapped inside silence. Imagine the girl looking around the room, strange walls, strange firelight, strange food placed before her, strange people watching every movement she made. Beside her was her brother, the only person who truly belonged to the same world she came from. He was not just her brother, he was her only connection to home. The villagers continued offering them food. At first, the children still rejected much of it, but slowly, little by little, they began to accept more. Beans had been the first thing they recognized. Then, over time, their bodies began to adjust. They started eating other foods. They began to grow stronger. And then something happened that made the mystery even more confusing. Their green color began to fade. The more they ate the food of Woolpit, the more normal their skin reportedly became. To some people, this is one of the strongest clues in the whole story. Because if their green skin faded after they began eating normal food, then maybe their color was not magic. Maybe it was not a curse. Maybe it was not proof of another world. Maybe it was sickness. Maybe it was starvation. Maybe it was the sign of children who had been living in terrible conditions before they were found. But even if the color began to fade, the mystery did not fade with it. Their language was still unknown. Their clothing was still unexplained. Their arrival was still impossible to understand. And no family ever came forward to claim them. That is one of the saddest parts of the story. No mother came running into Woolpit. No father arrived searching the fields. No relatives appeared to say, "These children are ours." No one seemed to know them. They had entered Woolpit like children without a past. And for a while the villagers had no choice but to treat them as children of mystery. But as days turned into weeks, the girl slowly began to adapt. She listened, she watched, she learned. She began to understand the people around her. The sounds of English, once meaningless, slowly became familiar. The world that once terrified her began to open, but her brother was different. The boy did not recover in the same way. He was weaker, more fragile. His body seemed unable to adjust. While the girl slowly gained strength, the boy faded, and this made the story darker, because if both children had survived, maybe they would have told the same story. Maybe they would have confirmed each other's memories. Maybe they would have explained where they came from in a way people could better understand. But that never happened. The boy's voice was lost before the truth could be fully known. The girl was left alone, alone in a strange village, alone with people who did not fully understand her. Alone with memories of a place no one else had seen. And now, without her brother, she carried the entire mystery by herself. The people of Woolpit may have thought they were saving her, but they were also watching her become something different. Her green color faded. Her old language began to disappear. Her strange habits changed. She began to become part of their world, but the question remained. What world had she come from? Was she a lost foreign child forced into a new identity? Was she a survivor of hunger and trauma? Was she remembering a real place, or was she a child from a legend that medieval people turned into history? The villagers had taken her in. They had fed her. They had helped her live. But they had not solved the mystery. They had only brought the mystery closer, because soon the boy would die. And when the girl finally learned enough English to speak, she would tell a story that made everyone wonder if the children had not simply come from another village but from somewhere far stranger. For a short time, it seemed as if the mystery might have a happy ending. The two green children had been found. They had been taken into care. They had been given shelter, food, and protection. Slowly, they were beginning to survive in the world of Woolpit. But survival did not come equally for both of them. The girl began to grow stronger. She slowly adjusted to the food. She slowly listened to the language around her. She slowly began to understand the people who had taken her in. But her brother was different. The boy remained weak. From the moment he was found, he seemed more fragile than his sister. He was frightened. He was confused. And his body may have already been suffering before anyone in Woolpit ever saw him. Nobody knew how long the children had been lost. Nobody knew what they had eaten before they appeared. Nobody knew whether they had been hiding, wandering, starving, or escaping from something. All the villagers knew was that the boy was not recovering the way the girl was, and that made everything more painful, because he was the only other person who knew where they had come from. He was the only one who shared his sister's language. He was the only one who carried the same memories. If the girl was the mystery's voice, the boy was its missing half. But slowly that half began to disappear. Imagine the girl watching him grow weaker. She was already surrounded by strangers. She could not fully speak to the people around her. She could not explain her fear. She could not ask for help in a way they understood. And now, the only person who truly understood her was fading away to the villagers. The boy's illness may have seemed like another strange part of the story. To the girl, it was something much worse. It was the loss of home. Because sometimes home is not only a place. Sometimes home is a person. And for this little girl, her brother may have been the last piece of the world she had lost. The people caring for them may have tried everything they knew. They may have given him food. They may have kept him warm. They may have brought prayers. They may have asked the church for help. But medieval medicine was limited. People did not understand illness the way we do today. They did not have hospitals, blood tests, antibiotics, or modern explanations. They had herbs, they had faith, they had observation, and they had fear. If a child grew weak, people could only watch, pray, and hope. But the boy did not get better. The story says he became sick and died. Just like that, one of the two green children was gone. No full explanation, no final answer, no clear record of his name, no clear record of his last words. Only the sad ending of a child who appeared as a mystery and died before the world could understand him. His death changed the entire story, because from that moment on, the truth depended on only one survivor, his sister. She was now alone. Before, there had been two voices, two memories, two witnesses, two children who could one day explain what happened. But after the boy died, only the girl remained. And that made the mystery more fragile. If she remembered something wrong, there was no one to correct her. If adults misunderstood her, there was no one to explain. If her words were changed as the story was told and retold, there was no second witness to protect the truth. The boy's death did not just take a life. It took away part of the evidence. That is why this moment matters so much. Because many mysteries survive because someone lived long enough to speak, but they also become mysteries because someone else did not. The boy may have known the path they followed. He may have remembered the place they came from. He may have understood the sounds they heard before they appeared in Woolpit. He may have known whether they were running from danger. He may have known whether their parents were alive. He may have known whether St. Martin's Land was a real place, a memory, or something else entirely. But he never got the chance to tell it. And so, his silence became part of the legend. After his death, the girl had to continue in a world that was becoming less strange to her every day. Her green color reportedly faded. Her body became stronger. Her old language slowly gave way to English. She began to live among the people of Woolpit. But every step she took into their world moved her further away from the one she had come from, and that raises a haunting question. As she learned a new language, did she lose parts of the old story as she adapted to a new life? Did the memories of her former home become confused? As adults asked her questions again and again, did her answers become shaped by what they wanted to hear? We do not know. But we do know this. When she was finally able to speak in a way people could understand, everyone wanted answers. Where had she come from? Why was her skin green? Why did she and her brother not recognize ordinary food? Why did they speak an unknown language, and how had they appeared near Woolpit with no parents, no road, and no explanation? The death of the boy made those questions heavier. Because now, the girl was not only a survivor, she was the last keeper of the secret. And when she finally told her story, it did not bring peace. It did not make the mystery simple. It did not give the villagers a clear answer they could understand. Instead, her words opened a door to something even stranger. She said she and her brother had come from a land unlike Woolpit, a place with no bright sun, a place of endless dim light, a place where the people were green. And with that, the mystery of the green children of Woolpit became far more than a story about two lost children. It became a question that has lasted for more than 800 years. Where was St. Martin's Land, and what really happened before the children appeared? After the boy died, the mystery did not end. It became even deeper, because now there was only one person left who could explain where the green children had come from. The girl. She had survived. She had been taken into a new world. She had watched her brother grow weak and die. She had slowly learned to eat the food of Woolpit. And over time, the green color of her skin reportedly began to fade. To the villagers, she was becoming more like them. But inside, she still carried memories of a place no one else had seen. At first, she could not explain herself. Her words were strange to the people around her. Her language sounded unfamiliar. Even if she cried, begged, or tried to answer questions, nobody could fully understand what she meant. So the villagers had to wait. They waited as she learned English. They waited as she became stronger. They waited as the frightened green girl slowly found a voice in their world. And when she finally spoke clearly enough to tell her story, her explanation did not solve the mystery. It made it more impossible. According to the old account, the girl said she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land. But this was not a place anyone in Woolpit recognized. It was not a nearby village. It was not a known town. It was not a country the villagers could point to on a map. It was a strange land, unlike the world they knew. She said that in this land the sun did not shine brightly. There was light, but not like daylight in England. It was dim, soft, unclear, a place that sounded like endless twilight, not fully day, not fully night. And even stranger, she said the people there were green, not just her brother, everyone. Imagine the villagers hearing this. They had already seen her green skin. They had already heard her unknown language. They had already watched her refuse ordinary food. Now she was telling them that she had come from a world where green people lived under a dim sky. What were they supposed to believe? Was this the truth? Was it a child's confused memory? Was it a story created by fear, trauma, or misunderstanding? Or was she describing something the medieval mind could only explain as another world? The villagers must have asked her how she and her brother reached Woolpit. And according to the story, she gave another strange detail. She said they had been with their father's cattle. They heard the sound of bells, then they followed that sound. Somehow they entered a passage, a cave, or a strange path. And after wandering through it, they came out into the fields near Woolpit. The bells may have been church bells. Maybe they heard the bells from Bury St. Edmunds. Maybe they followed the sound without knowing where it would lead. Maybe they became lost. But in the girl's version, the journey felt almost like crossing from one world into another. One moment, they were in St. Martin's Land. The next, they were standing in a place full of bright light, strange people, strange food, and a language they did not understand. To the villagers, this was terrifying, because it suggested the children had not simply walked from another village. It suggested they had crossed a boundary, a hidden boundary, a door between places, a path between worlds. That is why this part of the story has survived for so long. The green skin is strange. The beans are strange. The unknown language is strange. But the girl's explanation is what turned the story into a legend, because if she had simply said, "We were lost," the story might have died. If she had named a nearby village, the mystery might have ended. If she had said her parents abandoned them, people might have understood. But she did not. She spoke of St. Martin's Land, a dim world, a green people, a strange journey guided by bells, and a sudden arrival in Woolpit. Her words created more questions than answers. Where was this land? Was St. Martin's Land a real place with a name that villagers misunderstood? Was it a foreign settlement whose language sounded strange to English ears? Was it a memory from childhood, twisted by hunger and fear? Was it a story adults later shaped to fit the strange appearance of the children, or was it folklore, a tale of the other world, a hidden place beneath the earth, a medieval mystery that blended real suffering with imagination? No one can say for certain. But there is one thing that makes her story powerful. She was not trying to entertain anyone, at least not in the way a storyteller would. She was a child, a survivor, a girl who had lost her brother, lost her language, lost her home, and now had to explain the impossible to people who already saw her as strange. Maybe she told the truth as she remembered it. Maybe she described the only world she knew. Maybe her words were misunderstood by the adults who recorded the story later. Or maybe she was trying to explain trauma in the only way a child could. Think about it. If two children had been displaced, hidden, starved, or separated from their family, their memory of what happened might not be clear. A dark place could become a land of twilight. A tunnel or forest path could become a passage between worlds. The sound of church bells could become the thing that pulled them out of one life and into another. And if their skin looked green from sickness or hunger, adults might connect that to the idea of a green people. This is why the story is so difficult to solve. Every detail can be read two ways. St. Martin's Land could be a real place, or a legendary place. The dim light could describe an underground or forested area, or it could describe a mythical world. The bells could be ordinary church bells, or something symbolic. The green people could be sick children, or something far stranger. And the girl herself stands at the center of it all, not as a monster, not as a creature, but as a child carrying a story that the world still does not know how to understand. As time passed, she reportedly adjusted to life in England. She learned the language. She ate normal food. She lost the green color in her skin. She grew older. She became part of the human world everyone recognized. But the mystery of her beginning never disappeared, because even after she changed, the story remained. People remembered the day two green children appeared in Woolpit. They remembered the boy who died. They remembered the girl who survived. And they remembered the strange land she claimed they came from, a land with no bright sun, a land of twilight, a land where everyone was green. Her story left behind a question that has followed history for more than 800 years. Was St. Martin's Land a real place that has been forgotten? Was it a child's broken memory of trauma? Was it a medieval fairy tale built around real children? Or did the green children of Woolpit come from somewhere we still cannot explain? The girl finally gave the world an answer. But the answer became the greatest mystery of all. To understand why the green children of Woolpit became such a lasting mystery, we have to look at something very important. This story did not begin on the internet. It did not begin in a modern horror book. It did not begin as a movie script. The story was written down hundreds of years ago by medieval chroniclers. And that is one reason people still talk about it today. Because if this was only a village rumor, it might have disappeared. If it was only a campfire story, it might have faded with time. But somehow, the strange tale of two green children appearing in Woolpit was recorded, preserved, repeated, and carried across more than 800 years. The two main writers connected to this mystery were William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall. They were not scientists. They were not detectives. They were not modern historians with cameras, documents, and forensic evidence. They were medieval writers living in a world where religion, rumor, history, and wonder often mixed together. That is important to remember, because when we read a medieval account, we are not reading a police report. We are reading the way people of that time understood the world. They recorded wars. They recorded kings. They recorded miracles. They recorded strange signs. They recorded events that seemed too unusual to ignore. And somewhere among those records, the green children of Woolpit found their place. That does not mean every detail happened exactly as written. But it does mean the story became important enough for people to remember. And that is what makes the mystery so powerful. Because the question is not only, did two green children really appear? The deeper question is, why did medieval writers believe this story was worth preserving? William of Newburgh was one of the writers who helped carry the story forward. He wrote about strange events and unusual reports from his time. In his version, the children appeared near Woolpit, looked unusual, spoke an unknown language, and had green-colored skin. He also included the detail that they would not eat normal food at first until they found beans. Then there was Ralph of Coggeshall, another medieval chronicler. His account also kept the strange heart of the story alive. Two children, green skin, unknown origin, a strange explanation from the surviving girl. The accounts are not perfectly identical, and that matters. When two old stories are similar but not exactly the same, it tells us something. It tells us the story may have moved through different mouths before it was written down. It may have been told by villagers, then repeated by monks, then recorded by writers. And with every retelling, small details may have changed. A word could change. A location could become more dramatic. A child's confused answer could become a mysterious legend. A real tragedy could become something supernatural. That is how stories survive. But it is also how truth becomes harder to find. Think about it. If a strange event happened in a medieval village, there were no photographs, no interviews recorded on video, no birth certificates, no DNA tests, no medical records, no official missing person report. Everything depended on witnesses, and witnesses depended on memory. Then memory became rumor, rumor became story, story became writing, and writing became history. By the time we read the story today, we are looking through many layers. The real children, if they existed, are hidden behind centuries of retelling. The real village is hidden behind legend. The real explanation is buried under fear, faith, misunderstanding, and imagination. That is why the sources are so important. They give the story weight. But they also remind us to be careful. A medieval writer could record something because he believed it was true, but belief is not the same as proof. A writer could hear a story from someone who heard it from someone else. A strange detail could be misunderstood. A child's words could be translated badly. A local tragedy could be turned into a miracle. And in the medieval world, people often looked for meaning in strange events. If something unusual happened, it was rarely treated as random. It could be a message from God, a sign of judgment, a warning, a miracle, or proof that hidden worlds existed beyond ordinary human life. So when two children appeared with green skin and unknown speech, people did not just ask, "Where are they from?" They may have asked, "What does this mean?" That question changes everything. Because to medieval people, the green children may not have been just lost children, they may have been a sign, a mystery sent into the village, a warning from another world, a wonder that had to be remembered. And maybe that is why the story survived, not because everyone understood it, but because no one did. The more impossible the story sounded, the harder it became to forget. The boy died before he could speak clearly to the people around him. The girl survived and gave an explanation that sounded even stranger than her appearance. She spoke of St. Martin's Land, a place of dim light, a place where the people were green, a place separated from Woolpit by some strange journey, guided by the sound of bells. When a medieval writer heard a story like that, it would have sounded like more than a village accident. It would have sounded like a doorway into the unknown. But now, hundreds of years later, we have to ask a different question. What part of the story is history, and what part is legend? Maybe the children were real. Maybe they truly appeared in Woolpit. Maybe their skin had a strange color because of illness or hunger. Maybe they spoke a foreign language villagers did not understand. Maybe they were refugees, survivors, or abandoned children. And maybe the surviving girl tried to describe her home, but her words were misunderstood. That is one possibility. But there is another. Maybe the story was shaped by folklore from the beginning. Maybe people in Woolpit already had tales of hidden people, fairy lands, underground worlds, and strange beings. Maybe when two unusual children appeared, the village placed them inside the stories they already believed. The children became green not only in body, but in meaning. They became part of a mystery larger than themselves. And once a story becomes legend, it becomes almost impossible to separate the person from the myth. That is what happened here. The green children of Woolpit are remembered not as ordinary lost children, but as one of medieval England's strangest mysteries. And because the sources are old, incomplete, and shaped by their time, they leave us trapped between two worlds, on one side history, on the other side folklore. In the middle, two frightened children standing in a field, one would die, one would survive. And the people who wrote about them would make sure their story never disappeared. But the sources do not give us the final answer. They only give us the mystery. They tell us what people believed. They tell us what was remembered. They tell us how the story was passed down. But they do not tell us the truth with certainty. And that is why the green children still haunt history. Because the evidence is strong enough to make us wonder, but too weak to let us know. The medieval writers opened the door, but they did not close it. They gave us names. They gave us a village. They gave us strange details. They gave us the girl's impossible story. But they left behind the one thing everyone still wants, the answer. So if the children were real, what made their skin green? Were they sick, starving, poisoned, different? Or was the green color never meant to be understood literally at all? To find that answer, we have to leave the world of medieval wonder and enter the world of science. To understand the green children of Woolpit, we have to begin with the most natural question. What if their green skin was not supernatural? What if it was not magic? What if it was not proof of another world? What if it was illness? For hundreds of years, people have looked at the story and wondered whether the children's strange color had a medical explanation. Because one detail stands out. Their green skin reportedly faded after they began eating normal food. That is very important. If the children had truly come from a race of green people, why would their color disappear if green skin was their natural appearance? Why would bread, meat, milk, and village food slowly change it? That detail makes some people believe the green color may have been caused by poor health. Maybe the children were starving. Maybe they had been living in darkness. Maybe their bodies were weak from lack of proper food. Maybe they had been through something so terrible that their appearance shocked everyone who saw them. In the medieval world, people did not understand sickness the way we do now. They did not have modern hospitals. They did not have blood tests. They did not have doctors who could explain anemia, malnutrition, trauma, or poisoning in scientific terms. So if two pale, sick, frightened children appeared with a strange tint to their skin, the villagers may not have known how to describe what they were seeing. They may have called it green. And once that word entered the story, it became the detail no one ever forgot. Green children, not sick children, not lost children, not starving children, green children. That phrase alone turned them into legend. One possible explanation is that the children suffered from a condition sometimes described in old language as green sickness. Simple terms. This was often linked with weakness, poor nutrition, and a pale or greenish appearance. If the children had been hungry for a long time, if they had eaten a very limited diet, or if they had been living in poor conditions, their skin could have looked strange to people who were not used to seeing such illness. And remember, the children refused normal food at first. They would not eat bread. They would not eat meat. They would not drink milk. They only reacted when they saw beans. This could mean they came from a place where their diet was extremely limited. Maybe they had survived mostly on beans or plants. Maybe they had been hiding somewhere with very little food. Maybe they were so used to one kind of food that everything else seemed frightening. To the villagers, that made them seem inhuman. But to us, it could mean something very human: fear, hunger, trauma. Imagine two children who have been separated from their family. They do not know where they are. They cannot speak the local language. They are surrounded by strangers. They are weak from hunger. Then people place unfamiliar food in front of them. Would they eat immediately? Maybe not. They might be afraid. They might not trust the villagers. They might not recognize the food. They might cling to the only thing that feels familiar: beans. That does not make them supernatural. It makes them children trying to survive. And if their bodies were already weak, that could also explain why the boy died. The girl slowly adapted. She began to eat. She began to recover. Her green color faded, but the boy was weaker. His body may have been too damaged by hunger, sickness, or stress. He may not have had the strength to survive the shock of a new diet, a new environment, and a new life. This makes the story sadder. Because if the illness theory is true, then the green children were not creatures from another world. They were not monsters. They were not magical beings. They were two suffering children whose bodies showed the signs of what they had endured. But even this theory does not answer everything. It explains the green skin. Maybe. It explains why the color faded. Maybe. It explains why the girl survived and the boy died. Maybe. But it does not fully explain the unknown language. It does not explain their strange clothing. It does not explain why nobody recognized them. And it does not explain why no family came searching for them. That is where the mystery refuses to disappear. Because if they were simply sick children from a nearby village, someone should have known them. Someone should have understood at least part of their speech. Someone should have come looking. A mother, a father, a neighbor, a priest, a traveler. But according to the story, no one came. They were found like children without a past. And that makes the illness theory incomplete. Another possibility is that their green color was not as dramatic as the legend makes it sound. Maybe the children were pale, yellowish, or sick-looking, and over time the story exaggerated their appearance. This happens often in old stories. A strange detail grows stronger each time it is repeated. A sick child becomes a green child. A foreign language becomes a language from another world. A dark homeland becomes a land with no sun. A lost journey becomes a passage between worlds. By the time the story is written down, the real event may still be there. But it is covered in legend. This is why we have to be careful. The children may have been real. Their suffering may have been real. Their strange appearance may have been real. But the exact shade of their skin, the exact meaning of their words, and the exact nature of their homeland may have changed as people retold the story. Still, the medical explanation remains one of the strongest theories. Because it fits one major clue: the green color faded. That detail matters. It suggests the children's appearance was connected to their condition, not their identity. If better food made them look normal, then maybe the mystery begins not in another world, but in hunger. Maybe they had been trapped somewhere. Maybe they had been abandoned. Maybe they had been forced to survive on whatever they could find. Maybe they came from a poor settlement where food was scarce. Maybe they had been hiding in woods, caves, or underground spaces before they reached Woolpit. Their land of twilight could even be a memory of a dark place, a forest, a cellar, a tunnel, a shaded valley, a place where little sunlight reached them. To a frightened child, that could feel like a world with no sun. And when she later tried to explain it in English, The story may have sounded impossible. But even if we accept that, another question remains. Why did the girl say everyone in her land was green? Was she describing people who were also sick and starving? Was she remembering a community suffering from the same poor conditions? Was she trying to explain her own appearance by saying everyone around her looked the same? Or did the adults misunderstand her? We do not know. And that is what makes this mystery so difficult. Every explanation solves one part and leaves another part untouched. Illness may explain the skin. Malnutrition may explain the weakness. Trauma may explain the fear. A limited diet may explain the beans. But none of it gives us the full story. Because the green children of Woolpit were not strange for one reason. They were strange for many reasons at once. Green skin, unknown speech, strange clothes, no parents, no known home, a refusal to eat, a boy who died, a girl who survived, a story of a dim land where everyone was green. That is why the medical theory is powerful but not complete. It brings the mystery down to earth. It reminds us that behind every legend may be real pain. It asks us to look at the children not as supernatural beings, but as vulnerable children who needed help. And maybe that is the saddest possibility of all. Maybe people turned them into a mystery because they did not know how to understand their suffering. Maybe the village saw green skin and imagined another world. But what they were really seeing was hunger, fear, loss. And the damage left behind when children survive something no one else can see. Still, even after we consider illness and malnutrition, one question keeps returning. If they were only sick children, where did they come from? Why was their language unknown? Why did no one claim them? And what was St. Martin's land? To answer that, we have to look at another theory, a theory that moves away from sickness and into the darker history of medieval England. Maybe the green children were not from another world. Maybe they were foreigners. Maybe they were survivors. Maybe they were children caught in violence, displacement, and fear. And if that is true, then the real story may be even more heartbreaking than the legend.